I was at Winco the other day, a couple days ago, maybe like a week at most. That's not important. What's important is that I didn't take video this time. But anyway, I saw Mexican soda. Now, you know how much I love my Jarritos, and this looked kind of similar, but it was sangrita, or sangria, or whatever. I'm not too good with the booze there. And it says, oh, a fruity, non-alcoholic drink. And I'm like, wow, that sounds good. I'm going to try that. So I got that along with my other groceries, got home, looking forward to trying this, what I thought would be a tasty beverage, a really nice, refreshing beverage. You know what it tasted like? It tasted like booze. Except it was worse in some ways. Because here I was having this expectation in my mind that I was going to drink a nice, sugary, sweet sugar water drink. But that didn't happen. It tasted like booze. In fact, I think it tasted stronger than booze, but none of the qualities of it. So I thought to myself, is this a drink designed for recovering alcoholics in the Latino community? Or at least the recovering alcoholics community at large? Then I thought to myself, oh yeah, I've encountered some of these people in my life before. And I don't know if you have, and maybe some of you are in the audience who can relate to this, either directly or indirectly. But you'll know that you're talking to an alcoholic when, within 10 minutes of meeting them, they'll mention something like, oh, my sponsor, or, oh, when I went to AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, or I'm an alcoholic, so, and then they'll tell you some story that has nothing to do with what you're talking about. See, the question of it is never far from their mind. They have not really abandoned that because it's still on their mind. And I don't blame them for this entirely because it's a traumatizing thing from what I understand. I've read enough stories about alcoholism and drug addiction, and it's good that people abandon that, but you know what's better than repenting of your alcoholic and drug abusing ways? Not being an alcoholic or a drug abuser in the first place. Let's say they have some things to say. One guy's saying some things that I think are true. My interpretation of the truth, whatever that's worth in this day and age. A guy who's speaking some truth who was not a former alcoholic or druggie, or a guy who's speaking some truth who was a former alcoholic or druggie. I'm going to go with the guy who never went down that path in the first place. It was a long time ago on this show, but I think I've mentioned this on something I uploaded here, that we Westerners have a very serious problem when it comes to exceptions. We think exceptions, we have a tendency to think this. We have a tendency to think that exceptions are the rule, not exceptions prove the rule. You'll hear it from whatever sphere of the internet retard right wing that this certain derelict here, he's good for the movement because he'll bring more people in, or for some other bullshit reason. It's hard to find accurate or comprehensive statistics on the matter, but there are professional rehab facilities where people with various addictions go and they get rehabilitated. Now, the people who run the rehab places will tell you that, oh, well, relapse is a part of the recovery program. It's a part of the revenue program, really, but we'll go with it. I remember looking into this a number of years ago, back when those rehab television shows were a popular thing. Celebrity rehab, just regular rehab, or sex addiction rehab, whatever, you name it, there was a TV show for it, so I got interested in it. And I pretty vividly recall, at the time, this was about 8 years ago, something like that, that rehab facilities self-report like a relapse rate in excess of like 90%. So even out of the exceptional derelicts, they still end up in the same place because it's rare for people to seek out this kind of help in the first place. Okay, now whatever problems there are with the help they're seeking, that's up for debate. But, they're seeking it. There's something to be said for that. But even the exceptional ones, they end up in the same place as they were before. So going back to the alcoholic thing, because that's a common malady in our society. But I've noticed this, I don't know if the rest of you have, where upon meeting an alcoholic, they'll mention something related to their alcoholism, and I understand that this this demon juice has led them into some pretty dark places and has defined a large part of their life due to the gravity of the things they have done while under the influence of demon rum. The specter of it hangs over their head constantly. And given some of the stories you'll hear about, when people hit rock bottom, you'll understand why. But they're not completely past them, which is why they mention it. If you're really past these things, you don't really give them second, third, fourth thoughts. You don't keep bringing up these demons and where they have led you, and these bad decisions where they've led you, if you're really past them. And I'm not saying they should mention them. I'm not saying they shouldn't mention them. I'd rather have them being honest. All right, if that's where their heart is, great. There's something to be learned from that. But to put this into context, it's not like I spent 129 episodes of the show telling you, oh yeah, I was a 16-year-old chronic masturbator. Oh yeah, I got a sponsor for that, and as a former this, I think that the point is that there's a lot of people who use their own personal failings, shortcomings, as an excuse to not do anything else. They're just they'd rather fight this war that they create within themselves than fighting the very real war that is taking place today. And right now you're asking yourself, what war could this possibly be? Is it what Donald Trump is slowly building us towards? No, it's not the big one, but it is certainly on the horizon. If you are listening to this right now, you've probably listened to other episodes of this show. You're talking about the erosion of First Amendment rights and speech in general in the West as an influence of corporations who are run by certain people who I have mentioned many times before, and their particular brand of shortcoming. We are in the middle of the summer months. Summer fun, kids are off school, they have a lot more free time. And this is the time of year when the gay propaganda machine kicks into overdrive. It's no coincidence they choose this time of year. They take advantage of the culture's overall weakness, whether you point to secular society or the church, and they infect a whole new generation into their way of thinking and behaving. I would like to use this time to invite my fellow Christians to avert their attention away from their belly buttons and listen to this DefendTheFamily.com alert by Dr. Scott Lively, Gay Pride and the Wrath of God. According to the 3rd century Christian monks called the Desert Fathers, pride topped the list of the infamous 7 deadly sins. However, the Bible itself identifies homosexuality as the most deadly, giving it the special designation of toeva, which means abomination if I get the pronunciation of that wrong. Well, nothing I can do about it now. In the Leviticus 18 list of worst possible sins which caused the land to vomit out its inhabitants, and making clear that widespread homosexuality was the cause of the incineration of Sodom and Gomorrah, Jude 1:7 referencing Genesis 19. That incident, unique in biblical history, expressly linked male homosexual sodomy, and that sin alone, with the last days' destruction of the world by God. So what should faithful Christians and Jews think of gay pride? Now, we have to mention Jews here because, homophobia is inherently Jewish after all. Where did I leave off? Okay, so what do faithful Christians and Jews think of gay pride? The international month-long celebration of homosexual sodomy that occurs every June, drawing support from numerous governments around the world. The answer should be the clearest for the Western nations with a Christian heritage, since the New Testament strongly reaffirms the condemnation of homosexuality found in the Old Testament. Romans 1:18 through 32 singularly identifies homosexuality as the sin that epitomizes the reprobate mind and the apostasy of the last days. See also 2 Timothy 3, Jude 1, 2 Peter 2. It is many of these Christian nations that are the most affirming of homosexual perversion, but the Jewish Israel, especially Tel Aviv, is not far behind. Well, credit to Israel, because somebody sent me, I think it was like a poll from 2014, an infographic rather, listing all of the nations and what percentage of them supports homosexuality, what percentage of them does not support it. And Israel's actually a pretty even split. It's like something like 40% think it's good, 44% think it's bad. So I don't know why that such a large percentage is abstaining from responding to that question, but it's worthy of note because despite their race's promotion of this stuff, and they have, the society isn't such a monoculture where everybody's on board with it. So, they are resisting a little better than we are. Just think about that. All cultures recognize that flags symbolize the powers that rule over a given territory. Something I agree with, something that I have said before on the show and have not gone back on. Raising its flag is the first action taken by any conquering power. How then should we interpret the raising of the rainbow flag across so many nations of the world, not just in June, but whenever the gay movement is formally acknowledged? For example, on the U.S. Supreme Court issuance of the Obergefell gay marriage ruling, Barack Obama used colored lights to bathe the White House in a rainbow flag. Importantly, no other special interest group received such honor by the ruling authorities. Spiritually minded people should recognize this as a phenomenon with deep significance. Just what does the rainbow itself symbolize, and why do the gays cloak themselves in it? The rainbow is the biblical symbol of the presence and authority of God from the story of Noah's flood, foundational to all the Abrahamic faiths, reaffirmed to Jews and Christians in Ezekiel 1:28 and to Christians in Revelation 4:3 in the New Testament. Could there be any more audacious statement of defiance of God than to hijack his symbol to represent the worldwide legitimization of sexual deviance he explicitly condemns? Could this be the meaning of the prophecy of the Antichrist in Revelation 6:2? I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. Does this verse definitively associate the gay movement with the Antichrist of the last days? No, neither does the spiritual comparison of Jerusalem with Sodom and Egypt under the Antichrist in Revelation 11:8. Nor do modern gay rights laws that require Christian businesses such as bakers, printers, and florists to endorse homosexuality so reminiscent of restrictions on buying and selling imposed on those refusing to take the mark of the beast. Revelation 13:17. That's the other topic I have planned for this show, something very closely related to the mark of the beast and the restriction of buying and selling, because it is happening in the name of, well, sodomite conquest over us. And you know what? Nobody is fighting back, but again, I'll talk about that in a minute. Still, it should give every Christian pause that the Bible's many warnings about homosexuality from Genesis to Revelation are tied so closely to the last days and to extreme rebellion triggering God's wrath, especially when these passages are viewed collectively. Indeed, the ancient prophet of Isaiah contains the following verse that seems so timely today. The expression of their faces bears witness against them, and they display their sin like Sodom. They do not even conceal it. Woe to them, for they have brought evil on themselves. That's Isaiah 3:9. This appears a perfect caption for the scene at gay pride parades. and invokes the many horrors that afflict the gay community. Insert funny haha AJ Styles sound clip here. From a long string of gruesome gay-on-gay slaying, such as the Jeffrey Dahmer cannibal killings of Matthew Shepard and Gianni Versace, to the lingering movement-wide plague of AIDS and other frightening STDs, carefully minimized by the pro-gay press. The current gay supremacist version of the LGBT movement was born June 28, 1969, in the notorious Stonewall riots, when homosexual men violently attacked police officers seeking to arrest a boy drag queen prostitute at the mafia-owned Stonewall Bar on Christopher Street in New York City. That was the origin of Gay Pride Day and of the vicious, implacable army of gay activists who have battled ever since to transform every institution of Western society into a tool of LGBT advocacy. Since that day, any person who opposes them in any meaningful way faces an intense campaign of personal destruction. By these means, they have nearly achieved the end of the family-centered order of civilization my generation took for granted just a half-century ago. The Apostle Peter wrote only 2 short letters in the Bible. The second of these is devoted to prophecy about the last days, and its special emphasis to warn the church about a form of heresy that would then emerge. In Christianity, heresy is a set of beliefs that contradict the clear teaching of the Bible. According to Peter, the last days' heresy will be rooted in beliefs about sexuality. Many will follow their sensuality, and because of them, the way of the truth will be maligned, he wrote in 2 Peter 2:2. He went on to define this heresy by reference to 4 biblical texts addressing sexual sin, including especially homosexuality. A close reading of 2 Peter 2 strongly suggests that the last days' heresy is so-called gay theology. Christians should not be surprised that the world today, and the U.S. especially, is in such a mess. We've been steadily losing the culture war that in so many ways is a contest pitting LGBT values against ours. And if these are the last days, that's the way things are supposed to be. However, our responsibility to stand steadfastly for truth has never changed and is not contingent on circumstances. We must always contend earnestly for the faith entrusted once for all to the saints, Jude 1:3. That means having the courage to speak the truth ourselves, to work vigorously to purge the heresy of gay theology from the church, and to continue to fight the culture war to win it, trusting God for whatever outcome will result. Lastly, we must rescue as many souls as we can from the seductive evil of gay pride, knowing that the wrath it heralds is too terrible to wish upon even our worst enemies. You can find a copy of that on WND.com. Very, very, very good article. And one that is as relevant now as, well, he could have written that when I started doing this and it would have meant the same thing. I don't have to tell you how every corporation you could think of has emblazoned their logo or products with some variety of rainbow. You can go through my back catalog for plenty of documentation regarding the madness that the reprobates engage in. I don't need to remind you that they're in public school, private school, religious school, classrooms, all around the nation, indoctrinating your children into their way of being. This is something that I have known for a number of years. It is happening primarily, at least most effectively, through the corporate sphere, because they're now using it as a marketing gimmick. And, well, why are they using it as a marketing gimmick? Look who is composing the corporations. Who are the corporations hiring? Who are the corporations getting taken over by? It's the same people in those school classrooms indoctrinating your children. And they have a lot more money. They have a lot more money backing them. Some companies have more money than the U.S. government, or at least did at some point or another. Remember that story some number of years ago? How it was a big deal. It was a very big deal that Apple had more money than the U.S. government. That made the news cycle. I remember that. The point is that I started doing this in January 2014, and have we pushed back in any respect? No. I thought that writing and raising awareness, eventually moving into talking, podcasting, would push back against us somehow. But it hasn't happened. And I think it was Albert Einstein who had a pretty good quote about insanity having something to do with doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Maybe it wasn't him, maybe it was, I don't know. Lots of people get credited with things they didn't really do or say. You know, I have a lot of detractors, and many of them said, "What do? You just talk. You're not doing anything. You're not getting anything done. You just complain." And I thought to myself, you know, maybe there is something to that. Maybe there's a little grain of truth to what they're saying. You know, I make fun of right-wingers for adopting leftist tactics that they abandoned around the time of Occupy Wall Street. You know, they did it under the guise of whatever they did, not necessarily Occupy Wall Street, but the left, I always remember because I was in college during this time, and they were saying, oh, we're raising awareness for such and such. Some bullshit, who cares? But that's what they were doing, they were raising awareness, and, you know, any way I look at it, that's the same thing I've been doing here. Raising awareness against the one-sided war that is being waged. Decent, God-fearing people versus reprobates. But eventually I find out that the people I thought were decent, God-fearing people are on the side of the reprobates. You need an example of that. Here we go. Pew Research Center 2014 Religious Landscape Study conducted June 4th through September 30th, 2014. Almost all Christian groups now more accepting of homosexuality. 70% say yes. 70% of who? Catholics. 62% Orthodox Christians. Now, how can I compete with that? Any ideas? How can I compete with that on the propaganda front? When they're saying, oh yeah, sure. They have a hell of a lot bigger of a support system to enable this, to continue this poisonous idea. It's like, oh, well, you know, this wishy-washy, let's focus on the exception bullshit. How about this one? This led me to say some pretty crazy things when I saw it back when I was more active in the Facebook page scene. It says, anybody... Okay, well, I'm going to tell you who said this first. Archbishop Darmid Martin of Dublin. He says... I think it's a he. He looks like an old lesbian, but whatever. So he says, anybody who doesn't show love towards gay and lesbian people is insulting God. They are not just homophobic if they do that. They're actually godophobic because God loves every one of those people. Look, that could be a fake quote, but, you know, all these Onion-style fake news sites, they're just reporting the news 10 years before it's actually news. So here's a high-ranking member of the one true church telling me what's what. Pope Francis says, who am I to judge? And I say, well, who am I to argue? So here's that Scott Lively article was at least half the reason why I sat down and recorded something, and why you are listening to it now. But the other half, I'm going to direct your attention to a couple of videos. This comes from probably my favorite church in America, the Outlaw World Missionary Church, headed by the Honorable Pastor James David Manning, who you might know rose to fame 9 years ago when he said some pretty inflammatory things about the then Democratic presidential candidate Barack Hussein Obama, calling him a long-legged Baghdadi, and I've been following him ever since that. And, you know, he's been going through some troubles lately. PayPal canceled the church's account so they can no longer take offerings from their congregation through PayPal. They can no longer take offerings from well-wishers like myself. And keep in mind, they run a school there. They feed and house homeless people who need it. Doing some really good things over there, but apparently not good enough because they're getting shut down for hate speech by PayPal fine, whatever. There are other ways to take payment, so he continues on. Well, this last week or two, he's uploading a series of videos called The Sodomite Spheres, and he's talking about how he can no longer take offerings and donations via MasterCard and Visa. No debit cards, no credit cards. So you say, okay, go mail it by check. You know, you trace checks and where they're going. Banks could very easily use their existing infrastructure to track people's bank accounts where they are sending money. And if they are sending money to a flagged account, well, then maybe your account will be compromised too. First, there's the person you're sending it to, then yours. Now, obviously, we're not to that point quite yet, but we are on our way there. You know, in a way, this is more insidious than what the book of Revelation talks about. How it says you need to take the mark in your hand in order to buy and sell. You need to worship the beast in order to receive it. Well, that actually creates a point of resistance saying, no, I'm not going to do that. That's a very obvious situation where you can put up your resistance. See, in this situation, it's not. Your ability to buy and sell is revoked based on your belief. I mean, your ability to produce is kneecapped. Your ability to consume, well, maybe not yet. But it's much more insidious this way. This church's ability to conduct financial transactions to ensure its survival, and this is how most transactions take place. You swipe a card and there you go. It's revoked because of what they steadfastly believe. Now think about it. You may have something in your past, even if you think I'm completely wrong about everything and I'm so hateful. You know, there's something in your past that somebody could bring up that could be construed as offensive, as hateful, as violating community standards or whatever. Now you could say a situation like this, well, it's not really revoking people's ability to buy and sell because, well, you could still do snail mail cash and checks. You think that in the heart of New York City, where Atla World Missionary Church is, that's sustainable? It's not. So for all intents and purposes, their future is in jeopardy. All the kids they feed, well, they have one less source for a hot meal. All the homeless people they help out, well, they're going to have to go to some more LGBT-friendly secular organization. How dare those church people? Is it really help if you're receiving help from a godophobe? That's what they'll tell the kids and the homeless people. But yeah, the recent James David Manning stuff, I'll link to the YouTube videos below. They are worth a watch to give you the 411 on what's going on with them. Because what's going on with them is something that is happening to a lot of other people. The ability to buy and sell people are encroaching on that even more. People are removing that even more and saying, like, nope, you can't do that. Now you'd say, well, that's not really fulfilling end times prophecy, because technically, well, you know, the exact prophecy, you could say technically it's not being fulfilled, but the spirit of it certainly is. Not the same word, but it rhymes. It's like poetry. Haha, that is funny. You've heard me say that before. I know what that is. You know what that is. This is something I read about a number of months ago. It's about a fellow named Joseph DRUCE, who is godophobic, just like myself. Joseph L. DRUCE, born 1965 as some other name, is an American convicted murderer. Now you think, oh, he's a bad person. What could possibly, what's your angle here? Well, let's listen. Here's why I'm talking about this. While already serving a life sentence, DRUCE killed John Geoghegan, a former Roman Catholic priest who was convicted of sexually abusing children, and who had also been at the center of the Catholic sexual abuse scandal. Now, what was he doing in prison in the first place? We'll get to that. In August 2003, while in protective custody at the Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center in Shirley, Massachusetts, Geoghegan was trapped in his cell by DRUCE, who jammed the door closed so correction officers could not reach him. DRUCE then strangled and stomped Geoghegan to death. Autopsy revealed cause of death to be strangulation and blunt chest trauma. The state immediately began an investigation into procedures at the prison. There have been questions raised about the wisdom and propriety of placing these two men in the same unit, since prison officials had been warned by another inmate that DRUCE had something planned. It was noted while 2 guards are normally stationed in the unit where Geoghegan and DRUCE were being held, there was only 1 officer in the unit at the time. One had left temporarily to escort another inmate to a medical station. Union officials had noted there were staffing cuts previously at the prison, which they feel led to the prison being a more dangerous and volatile place. To who? To fucking pedophiles? To child rapists? Oh no, we need to protect those. Continuing. It has also been suggested DRUCE had been offered money to kill Geoghegan, or DRUCE thought he would gain prestige from fellow prisoners for doing so. A Worcester, fuck that. Jury found DRUCE guilty of first-degree murder on January 25th, 2006, after rejecting his insanity defense. During the trial, DRUCE was seen with a black eye he received from an individual who surprised him in his cell. The man who surprised DRUCE was reported to have been wearing corrections officer pants, suggesting a reprisal by prison staff for the embarrassment surrounding Geoghegan's murder. In June 2007, the Boston Herald received a handwritten letter signed Joseph Lee DRUCE stating the truth about officer involvement in John Geoghegan's death, along with the address youtube.com/Joseph DRUCE. The address contained a video taken by security cameras inside of the correctional center made during the murder. The 10-minute video shows the attempts made by correctional officers to open the cell door, as many as 5 pulling at one time. Eventually, the doors opened, officers extract DRUCE, and medical personnel enter the cell. However, inmates at Sousa Baranowski do not have internet access. Department of Correction officials are currently investigating who posted the video, as it is from an internal security camera. 10 years later, they still haven't found out what happened with regard to how those videos got leaked. At the time DRUCE killed Geoghegan, he was already serving life without possibility of parole for killing a man who allegedly made a pass at him after picking up DRUCE hitchhiking. Now, this is the only guy that DRUCE killed. And then he killed another guy. So, between that killing and this killing, don't you think that something about the pedophile priest tripped some triggers in Mr. DRUCE's mind? Think about it. Somebody who's picking up a hitchhiker and saying, like, I want to butt fuck you. You think that guy hasn't raped kids before? Now that sounds like something that a guy who picks up hitchhikers would do. After all, what is the average pederast's notch count before they get caught? Is it in the hundreds? I've heard that somewhere before. That's what sane, godly people do. But no, I'm godophobic for making the connection. That somebody who's trying to commit anal violence against poor hitchhikers, I'm godophobic for calling that guy a bad person. I don't feel bad when stuff like this happens. I don't. Oh, this is so terrible. Fuck that. As far as I'm concerned, he made the world a better place when he killed that pederast Catholic priest when he was in prison. But if you do something to make the world just a little bit of a better place, you will be punished. Do you like that reality? Do you like that this is the world that surrounds you? And no one else promotes it more fervently. This kind of world where people can get away with shit like this. Where a guy who rapes a bunch of kids it takes a fellow inmate to do what needs to be done to him. No one promotes this kind of world more than America does. No one promotes this world where they let corporations blacklist people for their beliefs. Not just any beliefs, but their, very certain beliefs about very certain things. Somebody told me recently that corporations exist to do what the government is not allowed to do, and with each passing day, that statement rings more true. A world where kids are groomed by reprobate teachers in public school, in religious school, private school, in the churches. You think you exist in conditions that lets people see more easily the light of God? Something I forgot to mention when I was reading that article, but written by Scott Lively. It says, if I could find it here. It says that the answer should be clearest for Western nations with a Christian heritage, since the New Testament strongly reaffirms the condemnation of homosexuality found in the Old Testament. Romans 1:18-32 singularly identifies homosexuality as the sin that epitomizes the reprobate mind and the apostasy of the last days. And it is many of these Christian, quote-unquote Christian nations, that are the most affirming of homosexual perversion, but Jewish Israel, especially Tel Aviv, is not far behind. Yeah, and this extends to places like Argentina and Brazil, which is where that infamous 8-year-old boy twerking video came from that went viral a couple of years ago. And South America has a pretty deep Catholic heritage. Just putting it out there for whatever it's worth. The church whose high-ranking representatives say that homophobia is godophobia. Just putting it out there. And in other, the future lies elsewhere news, Chinese regulator calls homosexuality abnormal and bans gay content from the internet. China released a new regulation Friday banning any display of abnormal sexual behaviors, including homosexuality, in online video and audio content. The regulation, published by the China Netcasting Services Association, lays out strict censorship rules for online content ranging from movies and documentaries to cartoons and educational videos, according to Reuters. Under the new rules, content will be edited or even banned if it promotes luxurious lifestyles, shows violent and criminal processes in detail, demonstrates obscenity, including masturbation or displays of abnormal sexual behaviors, such as homosexuality. Now everybody will laugh and say, this won't be effective. They're so stupid. Guess what? It sends a message. And they're actually backing up that message with some concrete activity. A thing that say, look, the thing that they could point to and say, look, here's what we did about it. Thought I'd leave you with a little bit of good news there. The future lies elsewhere. If you make the world a cleaner place, you'll be punished for it. At least in the West. So don't be godophobic, mate, or else you'll go to jail.